Well, for Corey, this little video is for you. These are the entire collection of my Thomas TOMY trains. Yes, that's right, I actually have next to nothing. Sure, I've got 3 engines, Thomas, James, and Henry. However, James is broken, as you can see, when trying to operate on him because the cord which snapped between here, which I think happens too often, his entire switch mechanism fell out. So James is a bit of a sorry engine, doesn't really work. We've got Henry, who probably works the best of them all. Now, his cord between here also snapped due to play, but I managed to repair it with the help of my dad. And then we've got Thomas, who just works sometimes. If we take a look at this, you see him in my really useful engine music video, and he sort of crawls along. Ugh. And so, I never enjoyed having these sets. They were given to me as a gift by someone else. But anyway, let's have a quick look at them. Here we have the 3 engines that I own. James, we'll start with him. I like James's face. I think it's a very good reproduction of what it looks like in the original television series. And many of the older models of James, including older wooden versions, had this same sort of face, with the big cheeks and the round nose. However, as the models seem to get newer, they've lost this facial feature, which I find disappointing. The James model is a reasonably good reproduction of James. However, one thing I have always criticised these toys for is the fact that the pistons are attached like so, whereas James's pistons really should be attached evenly rather than pivoting off the front wheel. Another thing I criticise this series for is the tender size. Why does James need to have the battery in the tender when Thomas can fit it inside his own body? James is no stronger, and neither is Henry. Because then, I asked the question to Tomy, and now the Trackmaster company who owns this, why would you do this? Not only does it make the model look ridiculously out of proportion, especially on James and Edward, who suffer from oversized tenderitis, but it also means that the connection between these two is very flimsy and has to have special wires travelling through it. Now, on the new models, I understand they've simplified this wire system, but however, I still think it's far too easily broken, which is why I much prefer the new models of such as Murdoch and Emily, which have the motors in the tender, or other new engines like Ferdinand, who has the motor in him. Now on to Henry. Henry, once again, he's got his old kind of face. A face which many of the older versions had of these series, and including into wooden and into Urtel faces, which has also now been lost. He is probably one of my favourite Trackmaster engines that I've ever seen. He's got the size right, and the pistons are very nicely done. His tender, on the other hand, fits him, unlike James's. And then we have Thomas. Now, I have a really old Thomas. I'm not actually sure, from 1997 or 98, I think. But as we can see, this Thomas is old because he's still got a grey face, as opposed to the white one which was introduced. And then, of course, the new CGI faces. And you can see he's a little bit worn for wear. But it is interesting to note that in these sets, Thomas has a middle wheel which doesn't move. It is attached, like so. And we wonder why Thomas does not have a floating wheel, whereas James, though his wheel doesn't actually touch the ground, does actually spin. So there. I also own 4 freight carriages. All of these are very good freight carriages, however, the one criticism I would have is that the trucks do not have faces on them. Whereas in the television series, these vans would have all had faces on them. Now we slide over to El Faithful, Annie and Clarabelle. Now, Annie and Clarabelle are very nice, simple reproductions of the coaches. With, once again, Clarabelle having a smiley face and Annie with her surprise face, as in most merchandising. As you can see, Annie's coupling is broken, which is another thing I didn't like about these series, is the fact that while other companies use magnetic couplings, which are far more practical, they continue to use these unrealistic and strangely flimsy hook and loop couplings, which I really dislike, because in this case with Annie, I've had to use a twisty tie to be able to couple her to anyone else. So I would also question not only the use of the tenders, but also the use of these hook and loop couplings. Now, lots of people still prefer this blue track, but I would be inclined to think the opposite. I actually find the new Trackmaster track far more interesting, realistic, and far more holding together than this track, because this track, as we see here on even surfaces, does not clip together, has no bases, and so it doesn't clip together properly. As you can see, I do not have much track, and I've always found these points tiresome, because especially on a not smooth surface such as carpet, the points just simply don't stay. So in other words, you have to lift the track up to put the points into position, because they're double-sided. So there you have it, my very small collection of Trackmaster Thomas. Well, it's not really Trackmaster, it's Tomy Thomas. But one last thing to think. Do you like these pieces? That's right, the pieces that raise up the engine so that when they go over them they stop. To be honest, I thought that was stupid. I mean, what a waste of batteries. Especially on ones like these, where there isn't actually a function. The only function is Thomas stopping, in inverted commas, at the station. Because if he had coaches attached, they would be back here. So personally, I've never seen the joy in these pieces. So what do you think? And until next time, brought to you by TrainzXtreme.